This story takes place in an alternate version of the Harry Potter universe, one where a single change sets everything on a gentler, deeper course. Harry was not raised by the Dursleys. Instead, he was taken in by a quiet but powerful magical guardian from another world, one where tradition runs older than textbooks and magic is tied to memory, honor, and hidden vows. He arrives at Hogwarts not as a lost boy, but as someone already shaped by love, ceremony, and a bond that surprises nearly everyone. At his side is Ginny Weasley, still sharp, still brave, but raised in this universe not merely as a younger sister in the shadow of her brothers, but as someone who found her way to Harry years before. The two are already bound by a magical consortship, arriving at Hogwarts together as equals, partners, and something more than either of them fully understands. And into their orbit steps Hermione Granger. Muggle-born, brilliant, eager, and completely unprepared for the strange, old-world energy they bring with them. She expects tests and textbooks. What she finds instead is a friendship that rewrites her understanding of love, loyalty, and belonging. This story follows their first weeks at Hogwarts, not in war, not in prophecy, but in quiet beginnings, meals shared, prejudices challenged, and vows made by firelight. It is a story about what changes when children are given love early, and what remains the same, even in another world. If you're looking for a softer Hogwarts, rich in character and deep in heart, you've come to the right place. Hermione Granger was fairly well jittering as she stepped onto the Hogwarts Express for her first trip to school. Had she read enough? Was there something vital that she'd missed? Would she make a respectable showing whatever test of magic and will there was to sort them into their houses? Would she make friends? Well, friends might be a bit much to hope for, but anything was possible. After all, magic was real, and almost a year ago she'd found out that the strange things that happened all her life had a natural explanation. Assuming, of course, that magic counted as a natural explanation. But that had to be. After all, magic was real. And anything that was real had a natural explanation, right? She tugged her trunk down the corridor, passing compartment after compartment, all of them seemingly filled with older pupils. She wasn't nearly brave enough to ask them if she could sit with them. Would she end up spending the entire trip in the corridor? No. She'd break down at last and ask someone if she could sit with them. She knew she would. She just had to be pushed up against the wall hard enough to actually do it. She was thinking about that very hard when, suddenly, she ran into somebody. Hard. So hard that she fell to the floor. She blinked and found herself looking up at a red-headed girl who might have been her own age or a little bit younger. "Sorry," she said. "I suppose I wasn't looking." "Oh, don't say it," the girl said. "I wasn't looking, either, and I should have dodged better." "Sorry I didn't." Hermione was obscurely annoyed by the fact that the other girl had kept her feet, which made her feel guilty when the redhead reached down her hand. "Here, I'll help you up." It felt more like an adult's hand than it should have done, strong and calloused. Did all born witches have hands like that? Hermione didn't know why they would. Was it some other thing she'd have to learn? Farm work and wrestling large animals and swordplay, like some wild girl in a fantasy novel or one of Rosemary Sutcliffe's historicals? And if so, why hadn't there been any mention of it in Hogwarts, a history? Or at least in one of the other 24 books she'd got last year when Professor McGonagall took her to Flourish and Blots. Once she'd stood up and got a proper look at the girl, she couldn't help but wonder if she had dropped into a Rosemary Sutcliffe book. Or, to be more logical, if the redhead had somehow fallen out of one. She wasn't wearing the typical witch's robes Hermione remembered from Diagon Alley, but she didn't have regular clothes on, either. Instead she wore a mossy-colored tunic, a few inches shy of knee-length and belted at the waist, with knee breeches and stockings and sturdy-looking leather shoes beneath. She had a pouch on her belt, balanced with a knife, of all things, which looked a little bit like the one their guide had carried when she and her parents had gone on a hiking tour in Finland. Her hair was pulled back in a single plait, and she wore a twisted metal necklet that Hermione was surprised to recognize as a torque, just like the ones in the British Museum. "Hello," she said, in an accent that was mostly Devonshire with a little bit of something that Hermione could only call not Irish, not Scottish, not Welsh. "I'm Ginny Weasley. Very pleased to meet you. Hermione Granger. Pleased to meet you." They shook hands. "And this," Ginny said, "is my Harry." Hermione realized there was a boy standing behind the girl. He might almost have been a black-haired, green-eyed, somewhat taller, and male version of her, dressed in the same sort of clothes, made of soft cloudy blue fabric that looked hand-woven, a pouch and knife on his belt, an identical torque round his neck, his hair long and plaited. Something about him made her feel a little funny inside, which made no sense whatsoever, so she ignored it. "Harry Maximus. Pleased to meet you," he said, shaking her hand and bowing slightly. His accent was more or less home counties, but with a stronger trace of the same not Irish, not Scottish, not Welsh. "We were just about to take this compartment," Ginny said. "Would you like to join us?" Yes. Please." They lugged their trunks into the empty compartment. Hermione thought it looked as if Harry's and Ginny's must be enchanted to weigh less than they should, judging by how they handled them. She strove to lift her own into the luggage rack. "No offense to your honor," Harry said, "but would you wish me to help you?" "I'm all right," she started to say, but somehow it came out as a yes, "please." He pushed it easily into place. Or perhaps they're just really strong. Maybe they came from some sort of rural all-wizard community that hadn't entirely got out of the Middle Ages. Dear God, what if I've just made friends with the magical version of the Countryside Alliance? What do I do if they start talking about fox hunting? Or something even worse, like hunting dragons? She sat down on the bench opposite Harry and Ginny, who sat together with their arms about each other, in a sort of casual, accustomed way that reminded her of her parents. Were they married? But that was ridiculous. They were too young to even be boyfriend and girlfriend. Surely they were simply very close, perhaps they were cousins, and had grown up together almost like siblings. Not that siblings sat with their arms about each other, in Hermione's experience, but she had to admit she didn't know all that much about siblings. Some of her books said that medieval English folk had been much more physically affectionate with each other, so maybe some of that had survived with magical people, or at least with some of them. Ginny called him "My Harry," but surely that's some sort of a joke, or a peculiar wizarding expression that doesn't mean what it sounds like to me. It has to be. They sat there for a moment, not quite knowing what to say to each other, or at least that was why Hermione couldn't think of anything to say. Then Ginny said, "So, is it your first year, Hermione?" "Yes." "You?" "It's ours as well," Harry said. "So, he was interrupted by a white owl that seemingly dropped from the ceiling and landed on his shoulder with a bark. Hermione gave a little shriek. Good gracious, why did I do that? Fortunately, neither of her companions laughed at her, or indeed seemed to take any notice. "Hello, Hedwig," Harry said. "Have a good hunt." Ginny reached in her pouch and brought out what looked like a dog biscuit, except that it was, presumably, an owl biscuit. "Hermione," she said, "this is Hedwig." "Hedwig, this is Hermione." Much to Hermione's surprise, the bird bowed to her, as if it actually understood what was being said. "Hello, Hedwig," she said. Pleased to meet you." "She's our owl," Harry said. Ginny mind elbowing him. I think Hermione's probably figured that out. Is she normally so stealthy? I've read about post owls, but all the books seem to be saying they had to be let in the window, and the one with my Hogwarts letter dropped it in my lap when I was sitting in the back garden. "Well, Hedwig's a bit special," Harry said. "I don't think it's apparition, exactly, but she's simply brilliant, aren't you, Hedwig?" Ginny said. "So, may I take it you're Muggle-born, Hermione?" "Yes. But I've read all our set books, and a lot of other books as well, and I've tried a few spells and they all seem to work, and—" "Don't worry," Ginny said. "It's fine. We're neither of us pure-blood bigots. Very much the opposite, in fact. My mum, God's blessing on her, was a Muggle-born," Harry said. "I'd be a right Amadan if I had a problem with you for being just like her. My Ginny will testify I'm well dense betimes, but I hope I'm never that stupid." "I don't reckon you could be, my heart," Ginny said. "And if you ever should be, I'll know you're possessed and I'll owl up teacher and Father Dunstan and we'll have you exorcised by the next sunrise." "Does that happen?" Hermione couldn't help but blurt. "I'd always thought that sort of thing was all, well, superstition. But then again, I'd always thought magic was superstition, at least once I was old enough to know that fantasy novels and fairy tales were only stories, but here I am with a wand in my pocket and a trunk full of spellbooks." "It's been known to happen," Harry said, "but you needn't worry about it too much. You don't seem the sort for studying dark magic, so you're not much like to stumble into anything demonic. You could think of it as being something like, a nuclear power plant melt up. It could happen, but you needn't lose sleep thinking it might happen today, or anywhere near you." "It's called a meltdown, actually," Hermione said. God, why can't I hold my bloody tongue? She'd been hoping to actually make friends, and here she was sabotaging herself already. Much to her surprise, Ginny laughed. "See, there's all sorts of things I don't know about the Muggle world. And I knew there was one before my 11th birthday. I even grew up reading Muggle books and watching my dad tinker with engines and electric clocks. You'll do very well." "Oh. Thanks. So, well, where are you from?" "I was born in Herefordshire," Harry said, "in a place called Godric's Hollow, but I grew up in Surrey from when I was 15 months old until I was 8. Then teacher took me as her fosterling, and she has a little farm in Cornwall, and we're living there ever since. And I grew up in Devon, but then one day I took a shortcut, going to visit my best friend, and wandered into a wood 50 miles away instead. That's where I met Harry and... Well, I admit I was fantasizing about meeting wild old pagans and getting a sword and a torque, but 1 out of 3 isn't bad, and teacher says I can have a sword when I'm old enough to carry it, and it's really just as well that we go to mass and I don't have to stuff some poor soul in a wicker man and burn him every Lammas. Even my brother Ron doesn't deserve that. At least not most of the time." Hermione didn't quite know what to say. Do folk often wander 50 miles by mistake in the wizarding world?" "Not very often," Harry said, "but it seems as if my Ginny had a bit of a destiny on her. And it was my great good luck it pointed her in my direction." "Flatterer," Ginny said, poking him with her elbow. "It was probably just a bit of accidental magic. So, enough about us. Hermione, what about you?" "Well, I grew up in Oxford, and my parents are both dentists. I always thought I'd be an historian or an archaeologist, but on the morning of my 11th birthday an owl dropped a letter in my lap saying I was meant to come to Hogwarts the next September. I thought it was my cousin Orestes having a bit of fun with a catapult at first, but then Professor McGonagall showed up at the door and, well, here I am." "So, your cousin's a practical joker?" "He sounds like my brothers Fred and George. Although at least you've only the one of him." "Well, he mostly makes models and reenactors gear, and he says he wants to make props for films, but he was the only person I could think of who might write a school letter on parchment and use a catapult to drop it into somebody's lap. When he was 16 and I was 9, he made a fake treasure map and said he'd found it behind some books in our great-aunt's house. He had the rest of us cousins scouting all over the farm, looking for clues. Of course, it may be just been to keep us out of the hay barn so he and his girlfriend could snog in peace. The twins are going to be 3rd years. I'm not sure if they've discovered girls yet, then again, I'm not sure if I want to know about it if they have done." "Ginevra," Harry said, "be nice. They're good fellows, the twins." "Well, it's true they're not Ron. And they did owl us that Hogwarts toilet seat. I suppose they meant it kindly." even if calling it a belated wedding present was a bit crass. I do still wonder why they nicked it in the first place. A late wedding present? So, they are married, Hermione thought. But that was ridiculous. Surely Ginny's brothers were only teasing because she and Harry were so close. She was just contemplating how to ask about it when a red-headed boy barged into the compartment. He was wearing jeans and trainers and a t-shirt, perfectly ordinary clothes that somehow looked strange and a bit ugly after seeing Harry and Ginny and how gracefully they seemed to inhabit their odd not medieval garb. "Lo Gin, lo Harry. Mind if I sit here? I just got run out of my compartment. These three daft birds showed up and started talking about clothes and ponies and shite, so I thought I'd see if I could sit with my little sister and her husband instead. As long as they are not doing something, you know, weird." "Did they threaten you with sticks and hexes?" Harry said. "Who?" "Those girls. The ones who drove you from your compartment." "No, of course not. They were girls. Girls don't hit folk with sticks. Unless they're Gin, of course." Ginny snorted. "So, why'd you leave? You'll have to learn to get on with girls sooner or later, if you're ever to find a wife. It's not too early to start, brother mine. Just because your Harry's lets you plait his hair and eat off his plate and hold his hand doesn't mean I should try to find some girl who'll stop me playing Quidditch whenever I want to and swap me if I put my elbows on the table and make me put on a clean shirt every other hour. I've got Mum to do all of that, for Merlin's sake. First years don't play Quidditch at Hogwarts, Ron, and I've never stopped Harry flying. For that matter, he's never tried to stop me flying, unlike a certain brother of my acquaintance. Don't go talking nonsense and making things up, ickle Gin. Merlin's dairy walls, why am I even having this conversation? I was supposed to have a solid year at Hogwarts without my pesky little sister underfoot, wasn't I? What went wrong? Oh, right, she wandered off and got married, of all things, and now she just has to tag along with her husband, because she's always got to be the special one." Hermione began to wish that she'd picked any other compartment but this one, new almost friends or not. Was there going to be a fight? Harry didn't stand up. His left arm stayed round Ginny, his left hand gently cupping her shoulder. But something changed about his posture. Hermione wanted to say that his face suddenly looked much older, even if that was ridiculous. "Ronald," he said, his voice very flat and that peculiar bird accent very strong, "my brother-in-law, you may say what you wish about me. Mock my hair, my clothes, my speech, even my devotion to my dear consort your sister, and I will take no notice. But you will not insult her. You will not belittle her, you will not dismiss her, and you will not ever question her veracity. Even for kin, there are limits." Ron turned pale. "I'm only teasing her, Harry. For God's sake, don't get your knickers in a twist or start honing your knife or whatever it is people like you do." "Besides that," Harry said, "did you not notice that there's somebody else in the compartment? Shouldn't you have asked her leave to sit here, as well as ours? And shouldn't you have at least introduced yourself, or given us a chance to introduce you?" Ginny said. "Ron, this is Hermione Granger." "Hermione, this is Ronald Weasley. My brother." Ron looked at Hermione. "Oh. Well, if that's the way it is, I'll go and take my chances with the twins." He slammed the door behind him. Hermione could hear him stomping down the corridor until he crossed to the next car. "I'm sorry you had to see that," Harry said. "He's not usually so bad. Or at least he's not had an outburst like that in some while," Ginny said. "Sorry you had to be here for it, Hermione." "It's all right," she said. "It's not your fault." So, are you really, well and married?" "Technically it's consortship, which isn't quite the same thing," Ginny said, "but yes, we are." "It wasn't practical to do an actual wedding. There weren't enough witnesses, and teacher thought there might be a match already arranged for me," Harry said. Is it often done in the wizarding world? None of my books talked about anything like it. Well, folk usually older ones than us, I must admit, get married all the time, and it's not uncommon to swear some sort of hand fasting, either before the church wedding or in place of it, but the rite we used was from where teacher grew up. It's magically and legally binding, it protects me from anybody who might be trying to get at my Harry through me, and it means I get to come to Hogwarts a year early. You should have done that in any event, Harry said. You're more than ready for it, my Ginny. Hermione's mind was all a swirl. The part about protection made it sound as if Harry were somehow part of the royal family or at least of noble blood, but that was absurd, as all the books said that, barring a few token statements of allegiance that members of the Wizengamot and the Minister for Magic made but didn't take very seriously, the magical world hadn't answered to the crown since the beheading of Charles I. Having grown up hearing her father rant about archaic feudal trappings and how practically everybody else in the civilized world had got sense and declared themselves a republic, Hermione had been pleased to join such a progressive society. Why would somebody try to get at you, Harry? Well, it's a bit complicated, but... I'm sorry, Hermione said hastily, I shouldn't have presumed. It's all right, Ginny said. It's going to come out at the sorting anyhow, won't it, Harry? True. All right, then. Hermione, I'm in the habit of using my patronymic rather than my surname because there are problems associated with being named Harry Potter. Oh. I can see how that could be frustrating. Having the same name as the boy who lived must lead to all sorts of stupid jokes and people asking if you actually are. Wait. You're telling me you actually are that Harry Potter? Scar and all. I'm Afra. And Ginny came to his rescue. Well, most non-Muggle-born witches in our generation grew up hearing stories about Harry Potter. By the time I was 5 or 6 years of age, I knew that I wanted to marry him. My best friend Luna and I actually talked about whether we'd toss a coin for him or draw straws or just let the first one who found him have him, until one day she read a story that said he'd been adopted by a tribe of magical Bedouin who lived in palatial tents built on giant flying carpets and bred beautiful winged horses. We immediately decided that simply had to be the truth, because if Harry Potter had become a Bedouin he could have more than one wife and we could both marry him. Oh. Hermione had read books and articles about the horrors of patriarchy and polygamy, but in an odd sort of way she envied Ginny having a friend so dear that they could fantasize about being in a harem together. And then one day I got lost in the wood and met a boy named Harry, and we became friends, and his teacher said she'd rescued him away from his evil Muggle relatives and that if we weren't careful somebody might find out and try to make him go back to them, and I said I'd always wanted to marry Harry Potter but now I'd met him I'd rather marry my Harry, and that's when I learnt my Harry's family name. But why would it bother me that much? I mean, if I'd grown up as a witch. She knew that she ought to be all sorts of horrified at the mere thought of child marriage, but that wouldn't be a very polite thing to mention to the happily married fellow first years she was already beginning to think of as friends. Because you probably would have grown up fantasizing about marrying Harry Potter yourself, and when you found out he was already taken off the market, you'd be pretty unhappy with the witch who'd done the taking. If they'd come in here, I expect those girls my idiot brother was complaining about would be scratching their heads trying to work out if they wanted to hex me, grill me for information about our personal lives, or talk me into sharing. Do witches normally do that? English ones, I mean. Not usually, but I'm sure Luna and I aren't the only ones who thought of it. Does she know? Well, Harry said, when Ginny introduced us, Luna said, pleased to meet you. Ginny always did want to marry you. But don't worry, nobody would believe Loony Lovegood if I told them that Harry Potter was adopted by an exiled duchess from another world's island and married to a girl from Ottery St. Catchpole. They'd think the Nargles and the Raxperts had done something terrible to me, except they probably don't believe in those, either. And besides that, it's not the right time to tell them, so I'll not. And that's all she's ever said to either of us about it. She's a good friend, is Luna. I've got this sneaking feeling she's waiting until we're older to remind me about us sharing you, Ginny said. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. She is pretty, isn't she? Hermione really didn't know how to respond to that. Apparently Harry didn't, either, because instead of saying anything he began tickling Ginny lightly under her arms. She squealed, giggled, and began tickling him back. Part of Hermione thought she should go out into the corridor and give them privacy. Part of her wanted to stay right here and watch. And part of her wished she dared to jump in and tickle both of them, even if she had declared, at 7 years of age, that tickle fights were childish and inappropriate for a future Oxford lecturer. She didn't know what she might have done if they tickled each other for much longer, but somebody knocked on the compartment door before she got the chance to find out. Harry and Ginny hastily sat up and brushed at their clothes, even though nothing was actually out of place. Harry opened the door. The somebody proved to be an older lady with a trolley full of sweets. "Anything for you, my dears?" Ginny looked pensive. "Oh, Harry said something to her in a foreign language, one with guttural consonants and a lilt to it. Hermione wondered if it might be Cornish. She replied, and then he said something else that made her face brighten. He switched back to English. "I think we might be having something, Mrs. Do you care to join us, Hermione?" "My treat, of course." "Oh, I shouldn't. Mum packed me a sandwich, and I'm not really allowed sweets. They're not good for the teeth." "A little bit will do you no harm," Harry said. "Ginny and I don't get out so often, so this is a new experience for us as well." "You'd be very welcome, Hermione," Ginny said. "I never had much of anything to share with my friends, most of my life, and neither did Harry. If it would make you feel more even, you could treat us sometime in the Muggle world, maybe." Nobody had ever said anything like to her before. Yes, please?" Harry bought a little bit of nearly everything off the cart, except the blood lollies, which they all agreed didn't sound very appetizing, and handed over 14 sickles for it. "Please, Mrs., do you keep the rest? I'm sure you'll want a drink at the end of the day, after putting up with a lot of us pupils." "Thank you so much." When the door was shut, Ginny reached in her satchel. "We've brought some healthier food as well from home, pasties and such. Would you like to share with us, Hermione?" The little meal of pasties and cheese and apples, low-fat ham on whole wheat bread, carrot sticks, and assorted funny wizarding sweets turned out as one of the best ones Hermione had ever eaten. The sweets included cauldron-shaped cakes, little pies with pumpkin in them, chocolate frogs, which fortunately weren't really made of frogs, and Bernie Bott's beans, which came in flavors that ranged from brilliantly odd to very deeply wrong. The pasties reminded her of the ones she'd eaten when they went to Padstow on holiday, but the seasonings were surprising. Pork with apple and beef with onion and potato seemed normal enough, but there was something unusual along with the sage in the pork, maybe nutmeg, and she wasn't used to cardamom with beef, unless maybe in Indian food. For that matter, the chicken with ginger root, thyme, cinnamon, and garlic wasn't quite like anything she'd ever tasted. "This is really nice mustard on your sandwiches, Hermione," Harry said. "I don't think I've ever had anything quite like." "Thanks. It's from New Orleans, in America. My mum has a friend from university who lives there, and she sends us some every year. These pasties are wonderful." "Are they really old Cornish recipes, or is there some brilliant chef who decided to open up a bakery near where you live?" "Well, Bessie is brilliant, but she insists she's only a house elf, not a chef, for all we say otherwise," Ginny said. "The recipes come from where teacher grew up, but she says Bessie does them better than ever they were there." Hermione didn't know what to ask first. Was their teacher's home some sort of hidden wizarding Cornish village? What was a house elf? Was that Cornish you were speaking to each other? I don't want to pry, and I don't need to know what you were saying, and I certainly don't mind at all, but... "Oh, it's fine," Ginny said. "Harry was only reminding me that we have more than enough money to get sweets every now and then. But it's Iriane that we speak to each other. It's sort of like Irish, except different." One of Luna's uncles said that if it were English it would be sort of like a cross between Anglo-Saxon and Shakespeare, but with a lot of really weird loanwords from Greek and Latin and Hindi. Teacher comes from another world, you see. Did you ever read an alternate history story? Like the Crestomancy books? I always wished those were real. Harry and Ginny looked at each other and laughed. Hermione started to feel hurt, but Harry said that's pretty near exactly what Ginny said to me when I told her. We're not laughing at you, Ginny said, it's just, we're laughing because we're surprised and happy how much alike to us you are. Oh. Thanks. I suppose it is sort of funny. In a nice way. Most times at school when people were laughing near me it was because they were making fun of me. Especially if any of them were boys. I didn't like school, either, Harry said. My cousin Dudley stopped anyone being friends with me, and the first time we got rail marks my uncle saw I'd got better ones and hit me with his belt to stop me doing it again. Ginny squeezed Harry closer to her, and Hermione wished she dared to put her arm around him as well. I'm so sorry, she said. That's horrible. At least, I have my parents to love me, and even at school I didn't get hit. Once we were past kindergarten or so, the teachers thought I should be able to sort the nasty remarks and all of that myself, but they came down hard when there was hitting, even if it were only me getting hit. It's all right, Harry said, teacher rescued me. I can take care of myself now, and I have my Ginny to watch my back, and if anyone strikes me I'll take it as challenge to a first blood duel and make a right fool of him in a public place. But I'm sorry you had to go through all of that at school. And if anybody tries to hurt you at Hogwarts, Ginny said, you'll tell us, Harry and me, won't you please? Nobody hurts our friends and gets away with it. You don't have to. If your honor requires you handle it yourself, we'll not stand in your way, Hermione. But the Potters never turn our backs on a friend. Our honor requires it. It took her a moment to get the words out, and she blinked once or twice, surprised at the emotion she was feeling. Thank you. And if you ever need my help, I'll help you. The three of them gripped hands together at once. Hermione had seen people do things like that in films, but she'd never imagined she'd ever do it herself. She liked the feeling. They sat quietly for the next little while, talking about this and that. Then the door slid open again with a bang. Harry and Ginny didn't leap to their feet, but Hermione noticed that something changed in both of them. The way their hands were suddenly much closer to their knives was the least of it. A skinny blonde boy strode into the compartment. He moved as if he were trying to imitate a grown man of some stature, probably one who wore a full-length cloak rather than the school robes he was trying to make swirl about his knees. There were two bigger boys behind him, like a pair of dogs at heel. They looked thick, although the thought occurred to her that they might look that way simply because they felt it was expected of them. So, he said, they say Harry Potter's on this train. You're him, aren't you? And what if I am, you who apparently slept through your etiquette lessons? Excuse me. You've not introduced yourself, and here you are making assumptions as to my own identity. Not well done, that. The name's Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. And if you are Harry Potter, I can assure you there's plenty I can teach you about wizarding etiquette. Not least how to know which families are better than others, and which friends you need to make. It looks as if you could use the help. Malfoy gestured dismissively round the compartment. I reckon I can very well tell for myself. I do hope you're not typical of our generation's pureblood heirs, because if you are, the state of society is sadly decayed. As best I recall, you're the heir presumptive of Malfoy, a house of the middle rank at best. I, on the other hand, am the Potter of the ancient and noble house of Potter, and sitting in the company of my sworn consort and a friend of my house. It's a very poor joke, making sport of them, however innocent your intentions. A joke? A joke? If it's a joke, Master Malfoy, it's merely in very bad taste, and I have the right to show Christian charity and ignore it as I might ignore any other bit of indelicate schoolboy humor. But if it's not a joke, then it's my duty to contact the Lady Regent who oversees house affairs until my majority and initiate formal proceedings for an affair of honor. You being an heir presumptive and I a head of house, albeit underaged, the Malfoy would have a choice between permitting us a formal first blood duel and paying the appropriate honor prices to myself, to my consort, and to our friend. Ginny smiled. And whatever the Malfoy should choose, it wouldn't look good for his intended successor to be involved in such an embarrassing situation on his very first day at Hogwarts, before he's even sorted, would it? Indeed, Harry said, it's not my business to judge or speculate on the affairs of another house, but I'd not be surprised if, under said purely hypothetical circumstance, the Malfoy might consider another candidate when it came time to formally name his heir. There is ample precedent, after all, for selecting a nephew or cousin whose character makes him more suitable to the long-term interests of the house. You'd have to work very hard over the next decade in order to prove yourself fit, and avoid even the slightest hint of scandal or misbehavior. Hermione wasn't sure what all of this meant, but the blonde boy looked as if it meant something to him, and that something was intimidating indeed. For a moment, she thought he might actually apologize. But he gathered himself, and instead said simply very well. "Good day, Potter." He nodded about the compartment, as if that were the closest he could come to acknowledging Ginny and Hermione, turned on his heel and left. "Good day, Malfoy." "Good day, gentlemen." Much to Hermione's surprise, both bulky boys made a sort of half bow. "Good day, Potter." "Good day, ladies," they chorused. "Sorry for the both," one started to say, but the other tugged at his arm. "Come on, Vince." They half bowed again and left. "Interesting," Harry said. "The bodyguards, at least, have some notion of manners. Shouldn't they have called you Lord Potter?" "Not that I care, but it is appropriate." Ginny tugged lightly at Harry's plait. There was something oddly fascinating in the way the sunlight slanting through the window shone on her white fingers with their smooth, unpolished nails and the black of his hair. "It's actually a very nice gradation," Harry said. "Addressing me as Lord Potter, outside a formal situation and taking into account Master Malfoy's way of addressing me, could be construed as going against their liege lord. Smarter than they look, those two, I reckon." "Do? I mean, are there really oaths of fealty and all of that in the wizarding world?" "Well, there aren't exactly formal feudal relationships anymore, but there are alliances and agreements between certain families that are the next thing to it. I expect the families of those two and the Malfoys will have been associated for centuries. It might well have started when the Malfoys were simply strong farmers, back before they discovered their Norman heritage and changed their name. What was their old one? Malifield. I'm not sure why they thought Bad Faith would be better, but there you have it. Maybe they hired the wrong French tutor." Ginny and Harry laughed. "Good one, Hermione," Ginny said. "I like that." "It's got to be the truth," Harry said. "Or at least from now on I will choose to believe it so." "Well," Ginny said, "I suppose it's at least slightly better than being named Bucket and pronouncing it Bouquet, to be fair and charitable and all of that. You've seen her keeping up appearances? But I thought wizards didn't watch television." "Most don't, but my dad rigged one up to work off magic. It grew legs and a mouth after a month or two, and tried to eat his pillar drill. We had to load 7 sickles in my great-granddad's old blunderbuss and shoot it. The bits seemed to be trying to put themselves back together, so we buried them separately at 2-furlong intervals along a ley line. That seems to have done the trick, but we do check the burial spots every other fortnight, just in case." "Really?" Harry and Ginny had a brief staring contest, almost nose to nose, and at last Ginny broke up in giggles. "Well, somewhat," she said. "The telly didn't actually grow legs or try to eat anything, but it stopped showing anything but Yugoslavian state broadcasting from, as near as we could tell, 10 years in the past. Dad wanted to see what it would do after another month, but Mum made him break it up, and it's probably just as well. But teacher has some muggle friends, so every now and again we get to catch up on our favorite shows. There was a knock at the door, a polite little rap this time. Yes? Ginny called. The door slid open. Hello, said a round-faced girl with strawberry blonde hair plaited into pigtails. I'm Susan Bones, and these are Hannah Abbott and Neville Longbottom. Neville's toad's gone missing. Have any of you seen one? A skinny blonde girl and a brown-haired boy stood in the corridor beside her. I've not, Harry said. Have you tried? A toad? Really? If I got stuck with a toad, I'd make sure I lost it right away, said a braying voice from somewhere nearby in the corridor. Neville looked about to cry. For God's sake, Ron, shut your mouth, Ginny called out. If you're trying to be taken for a Malfoy, you'll need to bleach your hair. And if you're going to keep acting like this, I wish you would do just that, 'cause you're embarrassing our family something awful. Both Susan and Hannah had taken Neville's hands. That was awfully kind of them. I'm Harry Maximus, Harry said, ignoring Ron altogether. This is Ginny Nicet, and this is our friend, Hermione Granger. Honored to meet you. Pleased to meet you all, Susan said. Will we give dowsing a try? Harry said. And what's the name of your toad, friend Neville? Trevor, Neville said. I know toads are sort of old-fashioned, but my Uncle Algy gave him me. Pets are important, Ginny said. Harry took a little pendulum from his pouch. It seemed to vibrate between his fingers, then began to swing purposefully. Looks like he's over that ways, Harry said. Maybe in the jacks. Hannah was already moving. Hermione heard a knock, and the door opening. Come you here, Neville. I expect he'll prefer a familiar hand picking him up. Thank you, Hermione heard Neville say. Moments later, the boy came into their compartment, his toad safely in his pocket and both girls following close behind him. Thank you very much, Harry. You're very welcome, Neville. Looking forward to being classmates with you, I am. Assuming they'll sort me, Neville said. Of course they will, Susan said. If they'll not sort you, they'll not sort any of us, Harry said. There's Menacor Longbottom in the history books. My family thought I was a squib for ages. Until I fell out a window and bounced. And there you have it, Harry said. Neville, you're a wizard. And a good one, I warrant. Does anyone know how the sorting works? Hermione said. Professor McGonagall said it was a tradition not to tell us and I needn't worry, but I'd feel better if I knew. I've practiced every spell I could, and they all seemed to work, but if I knew which one mattered, and I could give that one another go through, I'd feel better when the time came. Ron came back into the compartment. Fred and George tell me we have to fight a troll. I think I'll duck low and punch him in the groin, run past him, turn around, and punch him again on the way back. Everybody says they're slow, and I've been practicing so I'll be fast enough. Eid. That would be wicked. God send you never have to fight a troll if that's how you're meaning to do it, Harry said. I take it you didn't bother looking up their vulnerable points, did you? Why would I waste my summer sticking my nose in books? It's obvious that's what you're supposed to do to them. And aside from that, Ginny said, the twins also told you that treacle came from mines, and folk prospected for it by tasting river stones to see if they were sweet from being near a vein of the stuff. As I recall, you spent at least a week licking pebbles all along the otter before Mum explained they were joking. One of my cousins said there's a magic hat that everybody has to put on, Hannah said. The hat reads their minds and tells which house they're supposed to be in. She blushed. I know it sounds silly. I suppose she must have been having a bit of fun, getting even with us younger ones for asking her 3 times a day for an entire week. It makes a lot more sense than fighting with a troll does, Ginny said. be realistic. Ron, would Mum and Dad blindly send us off to fight a troll, knowing we'd almost certainly be spending the next fortnight unconscious in a vat of healing potions if we weren't killed? They'd have sent us all to Beauxbatons without another thought, and tradition be damned. Ron glared at her. Fine. Just don't come whinging to me when the troll punts you straight to the Hufflepuff table and you have to stay there with all the other duffers. For a moment, Hermione thought Susan's glare actually might turn Ron into a heap of cinders on the floor.
Are you suggesting there's something wrong with Hufflepuff?
All of my family were Hufflepuffs, and my mum and dad killed 6 of you-know-who's best before they fell. My Aunt Amelia was a Hufflepuff. She was Mad Eye Moody's partner until he retired, and she's head of the DMLE now. How dare you? Hey, Ron said, leave me alone.
I'm just teasing my sister, all right? Why can't anybody take a joke anymore?
He stomped away down the corridor again. I'm sorry, Ginny said. I don't know what's got into my brother. That's your brother, Hannah said. He said his name was Weasley, not Nick Art, and I'm sorry, I know I'm not pronouncing that right. You're very close, actually, Ginny said. That's my patronymic. I've rather lost the habit of using my surname, since my Harry uses his patronymic, and it's simpler that way. I'm sorry for prying, Hannah said. I hope you don't. Don't worry yourself, Harry said. In fact, it will all come out at the sorting, won't it, my Ginny? You'd wish to. We might as well. I hope none of you mind, but my surname's Potter. Oh, goodness, Susan said, after a moment. You're Harry Potter. I'm very pleased to meet you. Our parents were friends, I'm told. My gran never said much about my mum and dad's friends, Neville said, but I've seen some pictures. My parents were in the auras with Susan's aunt and your dad. And I think we're cousins, somehow. I wouldn't be surprised. Teacher found me a history of the Potters that a man named Binns wrote 100 years ago, and it said there was a long alliance between the Potters and the Longbottoms, going back to the Wars of the Roses. I'm honored to meet you, Cousin Neville. And you'd be Ginny Weasley, then? Susan said. Hannah winked. Or is it Ginny Potter already? Whichever she'd wish be, I think, Harry said. In Teacher's culture, she'd keep her surname, but in ours, well, I'm curious to see what name they'll call her by at the sorting. Oh. Isn't that a little old-fashioned? And how did you keep it out of the papers? I'm Harry's sworn consort. The ministry doesn't keep track of anything but outright marriages, Ginny said. We had a small private ceremony, with no press in attendance. I wish we could have got married, Harry said, but we needed to do something immediately. There wasn't time to get a priest or enough witnesses, and Teacher thought there might be a marriage contract in the way if we tried. Susan and Hannah's faces got a very funny look on them. After a moment, Hermione realized that they were staring at Ginny's belly. Oh dear, she thought, feeling very embarrassed for all concerned. Ginny burst out laughing. No, there isn't another generation of Potters on the way yet. We're too young, and we've not even come close to doing that. I got lost in the wood, and met Harry, and, Teacher took him away from some people he shouldn't have been living with in the first place, so we needed to protect him, in case someone might try to force him back to them. A formal bond was the best way of doing it. This way, if some legilimens tries to get the place where we live or other family secrets out of my mind, the bond will fry him. Oh, Susan said, her face crimson. Sorry. It's all right, Ginny said. We should have put a bit more planning into our explanation, really. They chatted for a while longer before Susan and Hannah and Neville went back to their own compartment. Hermione glanced at her watch. It was early afternoon. They'd not reach Hogwarts till nightfall. The adrenaline was beginning to wear off, and she was beginning to remember how early she'd got up this morning. Harry and Ginny were leant against each other in the seat opposite her own, obviously more than half asleep. They looked very comfortable, and for a moment she wished she could sit beside them and fall asleep herself. I'd lean against Ginny, of course, that way she'd know I was only being friendly and hadn't any designs on her husband. But of course that wouldn't do. She wadded up her jumper into a sort of pillow and let herself drowse. The next thing Hermione knew, there was a gentle knocking, not at the door, but at the window, as if someone were rapping lightly on the glass with a thimble. She blinked awake. The sky had begun to darken, a smear of gold and violet sinking low behind the trees. The train was slowing. Outside the window, hills and pine woods slipped past like pages in an enchanted storybook. Ginny stirred first. She blinked twice, then reached out instinctively for Harry's hand. "We must be nearly there," she whispered, the sleep still thick in her voice. "Feels like twilight." "It's twilight," Harry murmured, shifting upright without letting go of her. "And I think I hear Hagrid." Hermione sat up straighter. "Hagrid," she echoed. "Yes," Ginny said, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. "He's keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts. The twins told us he meets the first years at the station." Indeed, as the train hissed to a stop, Hermione could hear a booming voice outside shouting something about first years. "This way now." She pulled on her robes with shaking fingers. It was real. All of it. Hogwarts, the sorting, the houses, the stories, everything. Ginny adjusted the pin that fastened her talk and helped Harry sling his satchel over one shoulder. Hermione noticed they moved almost without needing to speak, like they'd been doing it all their lives. They stepped down onto the platform together, a little group of first years blinking into the dimming light. Lanterns bobbed ahead like fireflies on poles. A great black lake stretched into the gloom, stars beginning to shimmer on its surface. Hermione gasped aloud when the castle came into view. It wasn't just large, it was vast, laid upon itself like a crown of ancient stone towers and turrets. Windows flickered with candlelight. Somewhere high above, something white and feathered flitted past, a ghost? An owl? Boats? Hagrid bellowed. "For to a boat!" Hermione clambered into a small wooden boat with Harry, Ginny, and Neville, who was clutching Trevor like he expected the toad to leap overboard at any moment. Around them, the dark water lapped quietly, as though it were listening. They drifted forward, the boat steering themselves across the lake in eerie silence. "Is this enchanted?" Hermione asked. "Everything is," Ginny said. "Everything that matters." As they neared the cliff at the base of the castle, an archway appeared, seemingly carved from the rock itself, and the boats floated gently through. Torches lit a low tunnel, and then they emerged beside a stone dock, damp and mossy, where steps led upward into the heart of the mountain. More students waited there, wide-eyed and silent. A woman in emerald robes and a tartan brooch stood by the stair. Hermione recognized her at once, Professor McGonagall. "Welcome to Hogwarts," she said, her voice both sharp and kind. "Follow me." They climbed. Hermione felt like every breath pulled in the scent of magic, old magic, like iron and ivy and ancient parchment. She walked between Harry and Ginny, and something about the weight of the moment made her feel taller, braver. At last, they reached the castle proper, and McGonagall turned on them. "In a few moments, you will enter the Great Hall to be sorted. The sorting is a ceremony that places you in one of 4 houses, where you will live, learn, and make friends." There was a buzz of nervous murmuring. "Do not worry," she said firmly. "The sorting hat takes your wishes into account, though it is never wrong. Now, stay here." She swept away through the great double doors, her robes billowing behind her. Hermione looked to Harry. "Do you think it'll speak to us?" "The hat?" "I think it'll do more than that," he said. "I've read that it sees straight into your heart." Ginny gave a tiny shiver. "I hope it sees love there," she whispered. "And loyalty." Before Hermione could respond, the doors creaked open once more, and McGonagall called, "Now, follow me." The Great Hall was vast and dazzling, just as the books had promised. Candles floated above them in mid-air, the ceiling enchanted to mirror the sky outside. The 4 house tables stretched the length of the room, already filled with older students in robes bearing bright crests. At the front stood a wooden stool, and on it, a patched, fraying wizard's hat. The sorting hat. It stirred. And then it began to sing. The hush that fell across the great hall was total, as if the enchanted ceiling itself had paused its stars to listen. The Sorting Hat stirred atop its stool, the patch over its left brim twitching slightly, as though it were trying to remember how to smile. Then, it began to sing. In days before the castle stood, when oaths were bound in stone and blood, for founders dreamed a home for all, yet warned, one day, it too might fall. So choose your path, both sharp and true. Are you the brave who'll dare the blue? Or clever mind who seeks the skies, or heart who never tells a lie? But mark me well, ye bound by thread, whose souls entwine, though none have said, when ancient names are found anew, the hat shall speak, but not for you. It paused for a beat, then, quite normally, added, right, let's get on with it. The names were called. First to the stool was Abbot, Hannah, who trembled her way to Hufflepuff amid polite applause. Then Bones, Susan, who looked calm until the brim had just barely touched her head and the hat shouted, Hufflepuff. Again. Neville Longbottom walked with a kind of hesitant dignity. Hermione heard the hat mutter for longer this time, loyal and brave, frightened, but not weak, yes, yes, Gryffindor. Neville nearly fell off the stool in surprise. There were more names. Some were decided in seconds, others lingered for long moments. The crowd seemed to shift and pulse with each decision, the houses already beginning to whisper, size up, invite, exclude. Then came Granger, Hermione. She swallowed hard and stepped up. The Sorting Hat slipped down past her ears and spoke in her mind immediately, calm and curious. Oh, yes. Bright. Very bright. Too bright for your own peace of mind, but we've seen your kind before. A little Ravenclaw voice says prove yourself, and a Gryffindor one says protect them. You've already chosen, haven't you? I want to be with them, Hermione thought, and was surprised at how easy it was to admit. They're strange and brilliant and kind. I want to understand them. Then better be Gryffindor. She slipped from the stool, cheeks hot but heart light. Harry gave her a small nod as she took her seat. Ron was next. The hat debated. Loudly. A sense of humor, eh? But not enough sense to match. Courage in spades, no doubt, but also pride, envy, and no small amount of noise. Might do well in Hufflepuff, actually. It would teach you something. Hermione could see Ron's face scrunching in horror. He mouthed something like, not Hufflepuff, please, and the hat finally barked, Gryffindor, then, but mind yourself. It took a long while before Nicet, Ginny was called. Ginny stepped forward, but not alone. She and Harry, Maximus, Harry, walked to the front together. A few mutters scattered across the hall. McGonagall's mouth twitched, and even Dumbledore leaned forward slightly. They touched the brim of the hat together. The hat seemed to hesitate, as if caught in something old and intricate. Ah. So it's the two of you. As foretold. Not in any book, not in any song I dared to sing aloud until now. Magic like this doesn't come often. You are both Gryffindor, yes, but more. Something between a bond and a vow. Something stitched with otherworld thread. Very well. Aloud, the Sorting Hat cried, Gryffindor. And well met. There was a strange stillness in the air afterward, like the castle had held its breath. As they sat beside her, Hermione whispered, what did it say to you? Ginny only smiled. That we came as one, and that was enough. The sorting finished not long after. Dumbledore stood and gave a welcome, brief, twinkling, and somehow deeper than expected. To the young ones who have come from far and near, I offer this advice: eat well, sleep soundly, and remember, magic is as much in the hearts we trust as in the spells we speak. The feast was magnificent. Hermione didn't remember much of what she ate, only that it was warm, rich, and perfectly timed to her hunger. When they made it to the Gryffindor common room, yawning and dazed, they were met by the firelight and portraits already gossiping. She found herself tucked between Harry and Ginny on the long couch. Ginny was braiding her hair casually, like they'd done it 1,000 times. Harry, without announcement, began to read a story aloud from a book that had appeared on the common room table. It was about a wizard who saved a village not by casting a spell, but by remembering every villager's name. Hermione didn't quite understand why she was smiling. Only that she was. And that it felt like coming home. The first week at Hogwarts passed like a story being whispered aloud, one sentence at a time. Classes were dazzling and difficult, often both at once. Transfiguration was strict. McGonagall's voice could snap a spell from the air, but fair. Charms was taught by a tiny, excitable man named Flitwick who practically danced with joy when Hermione levitated her feather on the first try. Harry and Ginny, of course, levitated theirs with an absent flick of the wand and a murmur of syllables that Hermione swore wasn't quite the same incantation. When she asked them later, they only smiled and said, "It's how teacher taught us." Same result. Potions, however, was a different tale. Snape seemed to loathe Harry on sight. His voice dropped to a dangerous softness whenever he addressed him, as though daring him to make a mistake he could pounce on. When Ginny corrected him, once, politely, he ignored her entirely. And when Hermione asked a question about brewing standards in continental Europe, Snape sneered. Perhaps Miss Granger should spend less time reading and more time observing. This is not an academic symposium. It was only Neville knocking over his cauldron, again, that saved Hermione from bursting into tears. Back in the common room that evening, Ginny muttered, if Snape glared any harder, he'd start curdling the milk from across the hall. Harry looked at Hermione. Don't let him get under your skin. He likes to see who flinches first. I don't flinch, Hermione said, sharper than she meant to. Then, quieter, I just wanted to do well. You did, Ginny said, slipping a hand into hers. That's why he doesn't like you. The second week brought flying lessons. They were held out on the lawn, where broomsticks lay waiting in 2 neat rows. Madam Hooch, who reminded Hermione slightly of an eagle in leather boots, barked orders that sent half the class scrambling. Hermione expected to fail. But to her astonishment, her broom rose at her command, and she didn't fall off once. You were brilliant, Neville told her afterward. Really? I was terrified. Didn't show it. Ginny soared like she'd been born on a broom. Harry was smoother still, less speed, more grace. He barely moved, but somehow his broom turned effortlessly, tracing silent arcs in the air. Ron muttered something about show-offs. But he said it quietly this time, and didn't stomp off. Instead, that evening, he came and sat near them in the common room. Not beside, exactly. Just close enough to hear the conversation. They didn't call attention to it. That, Hermione thought, might have been what allowed him to stay. Later that week, Hermione received a letter from home. Her mother had drawn a little toothbrush in the corner of the envelope and written "Don't forget to floss, even in castles," in purple ink. Her father had added a joke about Scottish toothpaste and Druidic plaque. She read it aloud, and Ginny laughed so hard she nearly fell off the couch. That same night, Ginny made everyone tea from leaves she carried in a little cloth sachet. Chamomile and honey brush, she said. Grown just outside the back stoop. It smells like sleeping well, Hermione murmured. It smells like home, Harry replied. The warmth lasted until the next morning, when Draco Malfoy struck. He cornered Hermione near the library staircase. I hear you're quite the expert on magical marriages, Granger, he sneered. Got all the books memorized, have you? Or do your friends keep the real ones in their secret pagan temple? Hermione turned to face him. If you're trying to insult me, you might want to check your sources. Also, your vocabulary. Oh, forgive me. Wouldn't want to offend the third wheel. That stung. But before Hermione could reply, Ginny and Harry appeared on either side of her, silent, watchful. You want a duel, Malfoy? Ginny asked, voice even. Or would you rather settle this like your ancestors, by hiding behind solicitors and hoping nobody notices you borrowed half your name from a frog? Draco paled. Careful, Weasley. Your husband might not appreciate your temper. Oh, he does. Keeps things exciting. I propose a formal challenge, Harry said. Not a duel. A wizarding debate. At week's end. You'll present your views on magical heritage and proper conduct. We'll present ours. 3 judges, neutral observers. Winner earns house points. Loser apologizes. Publicly. Draco's eyes narrowed. Fine. You'll regret this. But when the appointed day came, it wasn't Malfoy who shone. Ginny's rebuttal was poetic. She quoted spells older than Hogwarts and told a story about a Celtic queen who married a fisherman without a drop of magic but more soul than a dozen warlocks. Harry followed, cool and courteous, citing magical lore and ancient precedent. And then Hermione stood. She didn't plan to speak. But the moment took her. She read from Hogwarts, a history, the passage about how the magenta. But to his credit, or perhaps under duress from his own house, he bowed stiffly and muttered an apology. Even if it was the kind of apology one could set a table on. That night, Harry, Ginny, and Hermione sat by the fire while the fat lady sang lullabies in the corridor beyond. The common room was quieter than usual. Peaceful. Hermione was writing a letter home. Ginny was repairing a small tear in Harry's sleeve. And Harry was humming something old and lovely, under his breath, just loud enough for them both to hear. It began with a dream. Hermione couldn't remember how it started, only that she was walking through endless halls of stone, each corridor lit by candles that flickered with no flame. As she moved, the voices of her friends echoed in the distance. Not calling her, not warning her, just there. Gentle. Waiting. She awoke with a start, the moonlight pale across her pillow. The fire in the common room had burned down low. The dorm was silent except for the soft breathing of the other girls. Sleep wouldn't return. Hermione pulled on her robes, laced her boots by touch, and slipped through the common room and out the portrait hole. The castle was drowsy at this hour, not quite awake, not quite asleep, just listening. She didn't mean to go anywhere in particular. But her feet led her to a narrow side staircase she didn't remember taking before. The air was cooler, the stone older. Moss traced the walls like writing no one had ever taught her. A door stood at the end of a short hall. It looked like it hadn't been opened in 100 years, but when she pressed it, it sighed and gave way. Outside, moonlight poured across a forgotten courtyard. Standing stones rose from the grass in a perfect circle, their shadows long and precise. The air hummed, not with wind, but with stillness so deep it echoed. Hermione stepped inside the circle. A heartbeat later, 2 more sets of footsteps joined her. Harry. Ginny. They didn't speak. They didn't have to. Together, the 3 of them stood inside the circle, facing inward, the night folding gently around them. Hermione felt it first, something brushing her awareness like a whisper just beneath hearing. It wasn't a spell. Not exactly. It was more like recognition. As if the stones had been waiting. She reached for Ginny's hand, then Harry's. The 3 of them joined in a ring, and the moment snapped into place. A quiet warmth bloomed beneath her skin, not heat, but understanding. She saw herself reflected in their eyes. Not as the clever girl or the outsider or the overeager know-it-all. Just Hermione. Chosen. Needed. I used to think, she said softly, that I had to be the best at everything or else I wouldn't matter. That if I wasn't perfect, people would forget I was even there. Harry's grip tightened gently. I used to think I didn't belong in the world at all. Like I'd been dropped here by mistake. Ginny smiled, but there was something brittle beneath it. And I thought I'd never be enough. Not for my family. Not for the world. Not even for him. Harry leaned forward, kissed her brow. You're the reason I can breathe. And you, Ginny said to Hermione, you're the first person who made me feel like this, us, wasn't something to hide. Hermione blinked back tears. You've both been kind to me when you didn't have to be. We don't do anything because we have to, Harry said. We do it because it's true. They stood in silence a while longer. And then they each made a vow, not formal, not binding in any magic but the deepest kind. To stand together. To protect each other. To believe each other, even when the world didn't. As they stepped from the stone circle, the moon dipped below the edge of the forest. Somewhere in the distance, a great clock began to chime. They returned to the castle hand in hand. No one stopped them. No one even noticed. The next morning, they were simply back in their dorms as if nothing had happened. But something had. Classes resumed. Days blurred into weeks. Halloween came with floating pumpkins and charmed bats. Hermione brewed her first successful potion. Harry helped Neville with wand control. Ginny translated a riddle in ancient runes that even the professor hadn't solved. Ron apologized, awkwardly, for being a right GIT. They let him sit with them at lunch after that. Susan and Hannah began a Hufflepuff book club and insisted Hermione join. She accepted. Neville learned to cast a shielding charm so strong it knocked Draco into a hedge. And one evening, after lights out, Ginny whispered, Harry says we're safe now. But something's still coming. Something big. Hermione didn't ask how he knew. Instead, she said, then we'll face it. All three of us. In the last paragraph of her journal, Hermione wrote, I thought Hogwarts would be a place for learning. And it is. But not just spells. I've learned what it means to be brave, to be trusted, to be loved without needing to earn it first. I don't know what's coming. But I know who I'll face it with. And maybe that's enough. She paused, then added, no, it's more than enough. It's magic.